Caleb has an idea, which I'm going to go ahead and tell you on the front end. I think it's crazy. Should Tennessee be judicious and or limit its assistant coaching pay rate to spend more on NIL? Caleb, Tim Banks was the most recent to, according to Chris Lowe of ESPN, to re-up his contract. That seems to just be a matter of time. You also have Mike Eckler and Willie Martinez, who coaches linebacker and special teams and defensive backs, respectively, that are awaiting to see if they'll be retained. So, Caleb, I don't necessarily think that you have to bend over backwards for either Eckler or Martinez. So I guess this question is twofold. I would not hold back any money from Banks because you know how high I've been on him the whole time. I think he is integral to Tennessee potentially winning a championship. And I know that some schools, including Miami, came at him with some serious cash. As for the other two, sorry. You know, I feel like there are replacements out there. If they want to go give it a shot at Norfolk State, go for it. But I don't think either one of those guys, and I don't want to sound catty here, but I don't think either one of those guys are elite coaches. Now, I know Eckler brings energy, and I know Martinez is a good to great recruiter, but I guess I'm answering it. I got one foot on the dock, one on the boat. I'm paying 3 coaches if I'm Tennessee's athletic department, whatever they want, basically. Heupel, Garner, Rodney Garner, the defensive line coach, and Banks. The other dudes, the negotiations are going to have a much different feel.
So you don't think I'm crazy then?
I don't think you're crazy. I think the question is multi-layered. Let's put it that way. And I always think you're crazy, to be honest.
Let me unleash. Okay, so I'm not really going to unleash. I'm just going to say some things that may be uncomfortable for people to hear.
I'm scared.
I love the job Tim Banks has done. I'm a huge fan. Chris Lowe reported yesterday that with his extension, his raise goes from $1.5 to $2 million. I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't earn that. He's done a tremendous job.
I mean, you know what $2 million is nowadays? $2 million is about the same as when I started covering football. It was the magic 250,000 number. That when you hit that, you were considered one of the top coordinators in the nation. And Tennessee's John Chavis and David Cutcliffe did eventually hit that, I believe. But I actually remember a time when the assistant coaches were making, Caleb, $75,000 a year.
So literally, it was like a job. They literally had to have a job. Like,
yeah,
regularly.
And they didn't get multi-year contracts. And if you think about it, with the erratic nature of coaching, they could suddenly not have a job, have to move their family across the nation. I don't feel sorry for coaches now because they're independently, financially independent if they've done a good job. But back then, I felt for them. I really did.
Okay. So let's talk about, let me, first of all, before anybody tries to correct me on this, I get it. NIL money is not the same as what a school's paying players technically. In reality, it is. Because any money that is paid out is less money that donors have to contribute. So with that in mind, all the money's basically in a pot. You agree with me on that, right, Dave?
Well, I think they recently released that Tennessee's athletic department was valued at $275 million, which was a monster jump from the year before. I think they correlate with each other. I think if you've got a school that's spending that much money in donations and sorts of things, then you're going to have advertisers and guys like me that want to hire players. So I think they go hand in hand. I don't think they're directly correlated. Fair?
They're not, but like it's like whatever the school spends, whatever the school can spend, takes away from what the donors have to spend to supplement. It's like it's an accounting trick, is what I'm saying. In reality, it's nothing more than an accounting trick.
Well, and Caleb, to your point, let's remember this. It sounds funny to say, Tennessee and their athletic department is a nonprofit. So they have to spend every dollar that comes in every year. That's why bowl games, they would oftentimes lose 50,000 or so, despite getting, a $2.5 million payout. It's because they took every Bob, Judy, and Tom out to Arizona to watch the Vols get thumped by Nebraska.
Yes, exactly. It's very similar to, just to throw this out there for a minute, back in the, during the 2008 crash, you had all these CEOs like living in fancy jets and like having fancy hats and things like that. But they'd be like, but my company went under. That's my personal income. As if you can't help save the company by cutting your personal income. That's an accounting trick. Like,
well,
that's
yeah.
what.
And I mean, there's been times where maybe somebody on this very show has done that. So yeah, I mean, that's part of it.
So the point I'm getting at is,
okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I've been going around the clock to bring this up. So the $500,000 that was extra increase that was given to Tim Banks, make no mistake, that's connected to the NIL money that's spent on players. The NIL budget.
Wait. It's really not, though.
It is, because that's $500,000 more that they now have to solicit from boosters for other expenses.
Okay, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. But go
ahead. So that's what I'm saying. It's still connected. That means we're talking an NIL budget of $10 to $20 million at the most generous. And I mean, at the most generous, that's enough to buy one elite starter on a football team. Maybe two. $500,000.
Okay.
Now let's get to this. Let's talk about the value of coaches in X's and O's versus Jimmy's and Joe's. On an overall level, I think even at college, once you get to the tippy top, Jimmy's and Joe's outweighs X's and O's. I think that's even more prevalent on defense. I agree that Tim Banks is a great defensive coordinator. I think defense is so much more predicated on Jimmy's and Joe's than X's and O's, though, that I think coaching is much less relevant on defense than offense. And I mean, let's talk about the historically great defenses of college football and NFL history. No one says, man, that defensive coordinator was drawing up plays and nobody could think of. No, we name players. Okay. We name, like, if you go just to think of, you just brought up the Giants. You brought up Lawrence Taylor earlier. Yes, Bill Belichick was their defensive coordinator. I don't think Bill Belichick is famous because he was the Giants defensive coordinator. That Giants team was famous because they had Lawrence Taylor. Okay.
Pretty good point.
And another one, the 2000 Ravens, probably the greatest defense of all time. Who was even their defensive coordinator that year?
I don't know. I've never seen a group of dudes more athletic and bigger than when I covered the Titans a lot than that crew. I mean, you remember cornerback Christian McAllister?
Oh, yes.
I think his butt was taller than me. Like, he was huge.
And that's the point. You covered them, and you don't even remember their defensive coordinator from that
year. I don't. I remember, was it Brian No, what was his name?
Brian Billick?
Brian Billick. I remember he was like the most awesome guy to cover. I said, I was hoping to get a one-on-one with you. And he said, well, let's step in here. It's more quiet. He was like the coolest guy ever. And doesn't he come across as a jerk? But he was cool to me. Sorry.
You are making my point. Legendary defenses are remembered for their players, not their coaches, because defense is, I'll say this, offense is about 50% X's and O's, 50% Jimmy's and Joe's. Is that fair?
Oh, man. I think it depends. I think it depends on what offense you're running. I'm not trying to skip the question here, Carolina.
Elias is right. It was Marvin Lewis, but nobody remembers that it was Marvin Lewis coaching the Ravens that year.
Oh, he was good?
But no one's like that Ravens defense, Marvin Lewis leading them.
Yeah, with Tony Siragusa, Ray Lewis, Christian McAllister, we all would have been fine.
I'm saying defense, and I'm bringing this up with Tim Banks, is about 90% Jimmy's and Joe's, 10% X's and O's. No matter.
Here's where you and I differ. The word prospect does not mean guarantee, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're talking about spending money on high school prospects or spending money on guys to stay in house? Which one? Because there's a big difference.
How about spending money in the transfer portal on proven guys? Wherever you spend it. I don't know. Just spending money on better players. Spending money to make sure your team is at your talent is at where it needs to be.
Okay. I think with Tim Banks, you get something proven. So again, I feel like we're supposed to take these hard stances, I guess, because of what Skip Bayless has done in his crazy career. But we're not going to be like that. We're genuine. I'm going to say that I agree with you when it comes to finding guys in the transfer portal like Jermod McCoy or guys like that. I'm going to say I agree with you when it comes to paying Nico a little bit more money to stay around. I'm going to say I disagree with you if you're spending a lion's share of that money on high school prospects. I think NIL is shifting away from that and should.
Okay.
I mean, you have to pay them to stay competitive, don't get me wrong. Josh Heupel's not going to call up and say, yo, I know this school offered you 100,000. I've got a 50 for you. I got a $50 bill for you. You have to be competitive, but you can't overspend like Tennessee arguably did with Nico.
But see, at this point, we're talking about an NIL strategy regarding personnel of players. I'm just saying on a much more macro level, the money should be more geared towards that, however you strategize it, than it should be on the coach and on defense. Because I think, and I know this, I mean, I get it. Like, the greatest coach of all time is a defensive guy in Nick Saban. Nick Saban's defenses were so great because he was like getting world-class cornerbacks that were so athletic that could do things that nobody else could do. Okay. Like, if Nick Saban, I mean, like, let's be honest. When Nick Saban was at Michigan State, guys, he was 500 for the first 4 years there. Okay. So what I'm saying is that defensive coaches are so much more a product of the talent that they're coaching. You brought up.
Well, okay. Again, you're winning me over because as much as I like Banks's scheme early in his career at Tennessee, they still were woeful on defense. So you're bringing me to your side.
And you're not. And I know this about you, Dave. You are not you consider John Chavis's defense very simplistic. Yes. It was still historically great in 1998. Didn't matter. They had the talent.
It's true.
So, I mean, I think we oversell like the Nick Sabans and the Kirby Smarts and people like that. But I mean, again, Nick Saban's a great coach. I think most of what he did defensively, you and I could have coached those defenses, Dave, because of how loaded they were.
Yeah, I would agree. I could have done as good a job in the second half of the 2001 SEC championship game. I guarantee you that. Now, to Chavis's credit, a week before that, his Prowler package was the gem of his coaching career. So I don't know that we would have come up with that, but maybe we would have, honestly, because Tennessee was such an underdog. It was kind of like, go all in, do something crazy because you're not going to beat Florida straight up. So, but I think I don't want to sound like I'm ripping on John Chavis, but I think there are probably 25 other defensive coordinators in that era that could have done the same thing with Tennessee's defense.
Yeah, and let's talk specifically that 2001 year, that Miami team that was the greatest team of all time. Does anybody remember their defensive coordinator? That's probably the greatest defense of all time. When they had Ed Reed and Vince Wilfork, and who else did they have that's in the Hall of Fame that we just, that just like a litany of Hall of Famers on that defense?
Yeah, I remember being in Miami, and I tend to not watch the ball because it's on replay. But it was not hard to focus on the defense because Vince Wilfork was absolutely fun to watch. I stared at him the entire game.
He was. Oh, I remember that game, 2003, where he was blowing up Tennessee's offensive line. Casey Clausen, and a veteran move, drew a face mask on Vince Wilfork when he should have gotten sacked one time. I'm kidding. I don't think Clausen did that on purpose. But The point is, spend money on the talent. And I actually think in general, overall, NIL school money should be more directed towards the Jimmys and Joes than the coaches going forward. Okay. That's going to happen.
New poll question that is up, and that is, wow, who would you pay if you could only pay one, Tim Banks or Nico? And whoa, the numbers are crazy one-sided. Hang tight. Brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Caleb, it is so one-sided. I am stunned. And usually I feel like I have a pretty good idea of where these poll questions are going to go. Who would you pay? Tim Banks or Nico? I don't know if you've looked. Have you looked?
I looked.
Okay.
I looked.
75% Tim Banks. I mean, 2 years ago, if we're having this conversation and the poll question was, would you shoot Tim Banks in the leg to get Nico? People would have been buying firearms. It's bizarre.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's very true. And I mean, Nico doesn't seem. I told you guys I thought he was created in a lab to run Josh Heupel's offense. He's not. I mean, he's not that like Tim Tebow to Urban Meyer match made in heaven. So when you go to that, then yeah, you do got to pay Tim Banks for. I will say that. Now I'll say that. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Dave. I go back to Florida, 2006, 2007. Maybe even then, do you pay Tim Tebow or Charlie Strong more if you have NIL? Because those defenses won those titles in 06 and 08.
Yeah, but I think Charlie Strong was a little bit like John Chavis. I think he had. I think
agree.
that whole narrative back then that Tennessee has as much talent as Florida was dumb. I mean, they didn't. Tennessee had
In the 90s, they did.
No, they didn't. Even when they beat them in no, they didn't. Even when they beat them in '98, they were outplayed. There were just some key plays during that game. No, I think Tennessee had B+ talent. I think that Florida had A talent to A+. I think Tennessee always had to come. I'm not talking about night and day, but I think Tennessee always had to overcome a slight talent deficit.
I think you are crazy.
Okay.
I can look at the NFL numbers and prove to you that Tennessee had better talent than Florida during that time. Florida just had a coach whose IQ doubled the Tennessee staff combined. Okay, so like it's. I mean, I really do think that. I think that.
So you're telling me that you would take Steve Spurrier over Philip Fulmer in a game of chess? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes,
Yep.
I would take Spurrier
Just
over
beat you.
Fulmer in a game.
Yep.
I would say no, Dave. I would take.
Can't spell Citrus Bowl without a U and a T. Glad that Peyton Manning's coming back, 3-time Citrus Bowl MVP.
Dave, I'm going to tell you something crazy. I would take Spurrier over Nick Saban in a game of chess. Now, I think Nick Saban's a better CEO, program runner, recruiter. But Dave, equal talent, one game for your life, someone to coach. Spurrier or Nick Saban.
You know what's crazy about Nick Saban? I was talking to somebody that covers Alabama, and he's an elite coach. He's a better moneymaker. I mean, his Mercedes dealership is blowing up in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham. He's getting all these endorsement deals. He seems like he's on TV all the time.
Which is hilarious because he's not even charismatic enough to be on TV. I don't know how he finagled that.
I know, but it's just somebody was telling me, he said, who would have ever thought that Nick Saban's coaching would not be his greatest strong suit? That's bizarre.
I mean, look, Nick Saban was wasted in coaching. Nick Saban should have been president of the United States.